Well, I want to go ahead and get started. We are recording now. I'll go ahead and introduce you real quick, and then I'll let you take over. Actually, I think it'd be best if I let you introduce yourself. Who better to promote yourself than you?
Sure. I mean, I'm not super interesting, but my name is Taylor Keene. Currently, just took over the region for Genghis, and been doing restaurants my whole life, restaurant management for 20 years. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about myself except that I love what you're trying what you're looking to do here, which is to kind of get everyone to be able to share their experiences, so we can all learn, because there's so many different facets to what we do on a day in day out basis, and unless you're in it, you don't really know, you know.
100%. And that really is the mission. Is just to, I mean, speaking from experience, because it wasn't that long ago when I was a young manager, and it's very easy to get caught up in the toxicity of the workplace if you don't know how to navigate it properly, or if you don't have a good boss, or things aren't the lay of the land hasn't been structured in your benefit, or any new person's benefit. And I feel like in a lot of cases we go through it and we have high hopes, and we end up getting let down time and time again because the management isn't the management isn't where it needs to be. You're not given the correct tools or techniques, or a lot of the times we go through it, and it becomes overwhelming. You're learning something new by yourself without the proper help to get through it. And then to add on the external sources, be it single parent, mental struggles, family dynamics, anything like that that really plays into, we as managers, I know that you would agree with me. We tell people you leave your personal issues at the door when you come in. When you come in, you put your best foot forward, and sometimes that's hard to do. Sometimes it
Yeah.
really, your external sources are so overpowering that you really just fall short of the end goal. And I want people to understand that it's okay to fall short. Those falling shorts are how you grow and continue to become better. Um,
Sure.
so, I mean, really, like, my first question is just how long have you said you've been in the industry for how long?
Well, if you go back, I mean, 25 years working, but I got my first manager job when I turned 21, so 20 years managing. um and just kind of to ride off what you were saying. I know not to go off the rabbit hole
No, no,
there,
no, of course.
but I think what you said is so important, because one of the things I always have thought that one of the mistakes that a lot of people make as young managers is treating everybody the same. You can't really treat everybody the same. It's kind of like a fallacy to walk in. I mean, fairness does not mean that you treat everyone the same, because, like you said, everyone's personal circumstances, everyone's talent level, everyone's drive, everyone's experience is different, right? So to walk in the door and just to say leave that personal stuff at home, I mean, that we say that because we don't want to drag down what we're trying to accomplish as a team in the building. But as a manager, you can't ignore that personal stuff, right? So we tell the staff, hey, leave that stuff outside. That's not us trying to be jerks. It's just saying, let's focus, let's get through this, because everybody's got their own stuff. By saying leave your personal stuff at home, what you're really saying is everyone's got personal stuff. So your personal stuff does not take precedent over everyone else's, because we're all, in this together. And then as a manager, you have to take that stuff into account, because you can't just go and rule evenly across your staff. You can't lead them that way, because everyone is led and developed differently at different speeds and in different ways. So I think it's really important that you bring that up. Because that's always been in the front of my mind. I mean, walking into it as a young manager, when I was, my first job, I'm like, okay, well, blah blah blah. Everybody do this and this and this and this. It's like, well, not everybody can accomplish the same amount of stuff in the same amount of time. Not everybody cares as much as the next guy standing next to him. You know what I mean? So um, that's just really a really good bit of information to put out there for people that are kind of getting discouraged by the fact that why isn't the way I'm managing my team working? Well, you maybe it's because you walk in and say, well, here's your old stuff, now do what I say, and that's just not how it works, you know.
Right. Do you think that it stems from a lack of development on a higher level, from coming in as a new manager? Let's say you start as a floor manager and you have other floor managers, an AGM and a GM. Do you
Hmm.
think that the because a big part of the podcast is the impact of a strong leader, um,
Right.
and I really want to focus on that because since my experience at Genghis and working with Malcolm, that's the first time that I really had the ability to work with someone that cares so much, so incredibly intensely about not just the job but the people.
Right.
And you know, I've I was kind of that young manager that thought, my way or the highway. That's how I was trained. I was trained by a bar manager, in
Right.
fast food. So I really.
In fast food, my way or the highway is pretty much pretty much it.
But do you think that it's there's a chance it's just leniency? There's the trust but not verifying from higher ups on the front of younger managers.
Well, it's a double-edged sword. So when you talk about when I say you have to manage your people differently, I mean managers are also have their different styles that sometimes aren't going to work as well, and you kind of have to grow into that style. So it's when you say being under Malcolm was an experience that showed you what it was like to have a leader that cared and that wanted to develop you and stuff. I mean, that's so important. And I could say from my own experience that I never even considered being a manager. When I was a server and a bartender, I was making so much money, and it was such an easy job. I mean, you go in. Don't let's no hate on the amount of work. When I say easy job as a server bartender, I know there's a lot of work that goes into it. Trust me, but um, when you leave for you do it's very cut and dry. You take care of your guests, you do your side work, you set the next shift up, you're good, right? You don't go home like stressing out about your numbers and all this stuff. It's just not how the job is. So it's a very low mental stress job, or it can be. But until I was serving and bartending with a company that had a culture that was more focused on caring and more focused on the energy and on development, then I was like, oh wait, this all sounds really good. I mean, I served and bartended 3 4 different places, and I loved all those jobs um, for what they were. But then I started serving at a place called Famous Dave's, and which is a barbecue restaurant, and like it was just everyone in the corporate leadership structure was so bought in and was so energetic and was so just like believed in what the mission was. And so then I was like, oh, instead of just helping my guests, maybe I can make a impact on all the guests in the building. And I never really thought of it that way. So yeah, I mean, having that kind of like lighthouse that guides you. But the important thing to remember is no matter how many really good examples of leadership that you're surrounded by, you have to make that choice that it's what you want. Don't force yourself into it. Some of the worst managers, and some of the least successful managers are people that just become managers because they think that's the next step in progression in their restaurant career. What you got to remember is that restaurant managers are good ones are hard to find. So if you have a job that you've been at, you can be a manager there. They'll be like, yeah, sure. I mean, they'll make you a manager because it's so hard to keep good ones. But if it's not something you're passionate about and you don't, you're not ready to kind of lead the way that you want to be led, then don't do it because you'll fail. And you'll cause your team to fail, and you might discourage other people from becoming managers along the way because they see that you are a leader that's not really bought into what you're doing. Some people are just more comfortable doing the job they're doing. You see these 40 50-year-old servers that make as much or more as their managers do, I promise you that. And that's just what they want to do, and that's great, that's awesome. But that just from my experience, I see it all the time. It's like, oh well, I'm a manager now, and in your mind you're like, really? You never really seemed like the person that was kind of that would really want to do that. You got to want to do it. And then by the same token, even if you don't have those leaders around you, seek them out, because if it's something you really want to do, don't let the people around you um you know be your roadblock. because there are good people out there, and this is a good example of a way you can find it. I mean, of course, nowadays you can find leadership and motivational stuff and all sorts of information on any number of apps, but um, just from being in the store, those are the two kind of like sides that I've always seen, and it sucks to watch somebody feel like they're doing something wrong just because they were pushed into a position they weren't ready for. You know.
Right, absolutely. And I do want to ask, what do you define culture as, and what is I mean, how do you go about cultivating a culture? What's the first step of implementing or building up for a culture that is going to last years, or like at least your lifetime in your position?
That's such a good question. Well, again, culture is not something that you can that you can build if you don't believe in it, right? So again, it goes back to, don't tie yourself to a company or to a job or to a place that isn't. If the people above you aren't saying things that you agree with, then you probably shouldn't be a manager there. Now you can, if you serve or cook or something and they're paying you a good wage, I mean, that's fine. But if you are tasked with, hey, this is what, this is the mission statement, this is the priorities that we're looking to accomplish, and you don't really believe it, don't just take the check and take the manager job, because it's never going to, A, you're never going to be satisfied, and B, you're never going to really filter that information to your staff the way that it needs to be. So when it comes to building culture, it's, find one that speaks to you, and then just, without sounding corny, just like live it. I mean, I'm
Mm,
well aware uh of my talents and also my shortcomings, and I do my best to surround myself with people that can do the things that I am not great at and do them better than me. But when it comes to culture, it's unbending, right? You have to be, you can't try and build culture with your team until you have it established within yourself. So, you can't be like, well, I'm kind of a jerk and I don't really care about the customers that much, so I'll hire an assistant manager that's real customer service focused. No, that's not going to work. You
mm,
know what I mean? Like, because that's part of the culture in the restaurant. Now, if you're like, well, I'm not great at organizational skills, or keeping my stuff labeled, like operational stuff, sure, you can build your team like that. But culturally, it's all about, if you decide, for example, just the most, you know, plainest example you come up with is guest first. Guest first has to be, you have to always demonstrate that, because the
right.
second you show a crack in that armor, where it's like, yeah, that guest was just a cheap a-hole, well, then your servers, everyone's gonna be like, yeah, Taylor's right. Sometimes, yeah, usually they're right. You can never have that, and it's always got to be like, it's always just got to be a reflex almost, and it has to be genuine. Otherwise, people pick up on, people are smarter than we give them credit for when it comes to, your worst servers is sniffing out your weaknesses, I promise you, and they're they're going to exploit them. So, once you've established that, hey, no matter what, this is the way that I'm going to do things, then you can start bringing people in, and they can kind of, decide, again, the same way you decided, hey, is this guy saying the things that I believe in, and do I feel comfortable repeating that stuff? Because you have to be on the same page with your leadership team. And the
Right.
worst thing that you can disagree about is culture. The worst thing. You can't have people saying like, oh, well, he said do whatever makes the guest happy, and then they say, well, that's only in certain. I mean, you cannot have that kind of
Right.
like,
The
that
do as I say,
separation.
not as I do mentality.
Right. And it's, once it breaches your leadership team, you're done. I mean, you're absolutely done.
So I come from being a training manager, and one of the things that I teach other managers is little things like an employee being on their phone in front of a guest, employees
Mhm.
talking loudly or unprofessionally in front of a guest. As a manager, if you walk by that and don't say something, whether you know it or not, whether they do it intentionally or subconsciously, they're going to make a mental note that, oh, I guess it really isn't that important because I heard him tell someone last week, but he didn't mention it to me this time.
Right.
So and then you're actively working against a culture that you're trying to build. Um,
Right.
Now, I do want to ask because a lot of like what you said is really building it within yourself, and that takes some discipline. And so, I do just want to ask real quick as a side tangent, I guess, is there any routines that you follow now or have followed in the past that um, really helped build self discipline, and how did you go about implementing that?
Well, I mean, routine. I don't know. I mean, I can't think of anything specifically. I mean, I just it took me time to kind of stop letting other people kind of dictate the mood that I was going to be in. You know, once I started understanding that, and this is, you know, this came years ago, and this is what, like, when you say talking about being a training manager, this is something I tell like my shift leads all the time, is like, you know, you have to walk in the door expecting to do more work than anyone else in the building, right? So you probably won't. You know, there's probably, you know, you're probably never going to be the best on any given day, because that's just reality. I mean, there's always going to be someone better, but that doesn't mean that we can't be our best. So that's not so much a routine, but it's just a mindset that I tell myself every time before I walk in the doors. Like, you know, you see managers that are just so mad that they have to do everyone else's job. Well, I mean, sometimes that's what it is. I mean, that's, you know, as managers, we know that if everyone did everything right all the time, we would have nothing to do, right? We would have nothing to do. And sure, that's the dream, right? You know, if everybody did everything perfectly and did everything they're supposed to and showed up on time, and you didn't have to, you know, anticipate what was going to happen, then yeah, you could walk in the door expecting to have a nice lazy day. And we all know managers that have nice lazy days. The difference is that their staff probably isn't doing everything right, and they're just missing it. So once you kind of get that out of your head, and for hardworking people, that can be, your own worst enemy can be yourself. You know, because that's some of the best, you know, most talented employees I've ever had are the ones that I see getting frustrated more often, because they're like, well, how come I got to do all this and they don't? Well, you know, I don't know what's going on in their brain. All I can tell you is you can only control what you can do, what you do, and you come in and you do the best you can, and people will see that and they will respond to it. There are some people that'll be like, "Oh, well, you know, Zane's going to do it, so I'm just not going to do it." Well, those people will not be successful in life, but it shouldn't change the fact that you're doing it, because you're going to do it because it needs to be done, right? And there's other people that can be like, "Oh, well, let me help Zane," or, "Hey, Zane's been working so hard all day. Oh man, I want to be as good as Zane." You know, whatever the case may be. And I tell my managers all the time, I'm like, when do you, if I walk past anything that needs to be done, I'm going to do it, even if I've got my jacket on and I'm about to leave. If I walk past, you know, something that needs refilled on the cons line, or if I see a table with an empty drink or whatever, and it's not because I'm trying to, you know, say, "Oh, you didn't do it fast enough," or anything like that, but it's just a mindset you have to have. If you walk past something that you see needs to be done, then I'm just going to do it, because in my mind, I'm making that person's job so much easier, that they can do better at the other things they're doing, or they can focus more on the other things they're doing, right? So, um, you know, I wish that there was like you know, restaurants are so funny because everything is built on routine, but routine is the hardest thing to do in restaurants, right? Because there's so many variables. Like, everything is like, you do this at 8:30 and then you do this at 9:30, and, you know, and everything's like that, but that's never how it goes. So, you know, just almost understanding and accepting that is, you know, is kind of like my anti-routine, right? Is that there is not so much of a routine. It's just that you walk in the door and your job is to do whatever needs to be done. And even if other people don't do it, you're going to do it. You're not going to complain about it. You know, the, 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 the best lesson that, that I could ever give is, if you want your people to want to do better, then you can't walk around complaining about everything that's not done. You can't walk around hating your job, because then everyone's going to just, you know, leech off of that energy, you
Right.
know? So I don't know. I mean, when I was a young manager, I was a hothead, man. You know, I mean, like, I was one of those guys that I would never keep, honestly, on a management team.
Right.
Luckily, my first GM job, not I say luckily, but my first GM job was just me, right? I didn't have assistant manager. It was at a Moe's. You don't really have a management team. You just lead the store. And, you know, I learned a lot, but I look back at the way I was, and it would just never work if I was developing managers underneath me. And after over years, I started developing and training managers to go off and be GMs, after I kind of learned my lessons through a great owner who was very passionate, about what we were doing. So, but if you had sent someone to train under me when I was 22, I would have totally effed them up. They would have been terrible. You know, I would have been, it would have been just a total nightmare. Um, but like you said, failing is how we learn, right? So, there's nothing wrong with sucking at something, because eventually you'll get good at it, or you'll be a part of a team where you don't have to be good at it, you know? I mean, so but embracing those things and understanding that there's nothing wrong with you just because you have struggles. The struggles are totally normal, and you need to have them, you know?
Absolutely. Man, that just this last 20 minutes has been more valuable. You know, if I was still 18, just turned a manager, this is
Hmm.
the kind of stuff that I would want to hear. You
Right.
know, a lot of it is really just self development. People get stuck in the what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And we focus so heavily on how can I get better at my job, but the way to get better at your job is to get better as a person. You know, I really liked what you said. Going back a little bit here, I really like what you said about um, just making that effort, making that switch to continue to put your best foot forward. And if you are going in every single day being negative, not wanting to be there, it shows, and it really is going to set the tone for the rest of, I mean, everyone that works there, the rest of the shift, the rest of the day, the rest of the week. Obviously, you haven't been you know, GM your entire career. No one has. We all start somewhere.
Right.
So what issues, if any, did you face like regarding culture when you were maybe a server or an entry level manager? You know, what issues that you maybe didn't know that it was culture then, but now looking back, you can say, okay, this just wasn't, you know, culture wasn't cultivated here, or it wasn't, you know, the management team didn't go about it how they should have, and you know, it made you think maybe, is the restaurants for me? You know, have you ever had
Right.
an experience like that?
So I'll give you two examples. Okay, I give you, um, which now looking back again, it saddens me that I was such a little, for lack of a better word, prick when I was a kid. But so I give you two examples. One of them I think was pretty justified, and the other one wasn't. So when I was a busboy at Bennigan's, which was my first job, um, I mean, I loved it. I love, because you know, if you think about why we get into management and why we get into restaurants, I mean, I being a busboy, your whole job is helping other people, right? Like I'm helping the servers make more money. I'm keeping the dish area organized. I mean, like everything I do is to help people, right? So I'm 16. I'm busting tables. Bennigan's is like a two-level place.
Oh
I
wow.
don't know. It's been gone for a while, but like the smoking section used to be down here, and this was the, you know, like it was like a big bar, like a sports bar type place. You ever seen the movie Waiting,
Yes,
the
yeah.
Ryan Reynolds movie? So that's a Bennigan's. They filmed that. That's a Bennigan's.
Oh
That's
wow.
exactly what a
Okay.
Bennigan's looked like. But so anyway, I bust tables, and on Friday, Saturday, Sundays, we'd have two busters. We'd have one on the upper level, one on the bottom level, and the other buster, he was much handsomer than I was, so he would always be talking to the hostesses and having a good old time, and I would just be busting his tables. And one day, my manager, the server manager, came up to me. I was like, "Why are you busting his tables, man?" I was like, "They're dirty," and he's like, "Okay," you know. So he went and got on the kid. That didn't really change anything. So long story short, they got rid of the kid, and they just said, "Well, Taylor can do the whole thing," you know. And I didn't have to split my tip out. I thought it was great. You know, it was awesome. 3 4 months of that, you know, they did employee of the month there. Got employee of the month a couple times. I mean, I was like living this big-headed, I'm amazing type of world, you know. Um, but the the fact I was there all the time, I never met the GM. So that tells you how visible this guy was, right? So he was never around. I worked every weekend, all day. I was in and out of the kitchen and the front of the house constantly. Never met the guy.
Weekends when you would expect the GM to be there.
I mean, I'd seen him, like I'd seen passing glances, but I mean, I'd plaques, like I'd employee of the month plaques. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like I never had a conversation with the dude. So, anyway, one night, after a couple of months being there, you know, I said something about, we had a new dishwasher, and I said something about, now this is in Northern Virginia. That's where I'm from. I grew up just outside of DC, and most of the kitchens up there are non-English speaking for the most part. You know, and I'm a 16-year-old kid.
It translates to the South as well.
I didn't know really how to communicate with the guy, and I said something like, "Man, this guy's can't keep his shit organized, so it's like, you know, it's everywhere." And I kind of said that offhand to another server, and I couldn't unload my bus tubs because there was dishes everywhere. And it's not his fault. He was new, and he, you know, it was a busy night, right? And the GM overheard me, and he came up to me and just laid into me. I mean, just laid into me. This guy never had a conversation with me, knew nothing about me, and I just walked out. I mean, he called me lazy. He said, "You don't know how hard these dishwashers work." I had covered several dishwasher shifts before this guy got hired because we were short and stuff like that. And it's just like it was so off-putting. Like I never wanted to. I was like, why would I work in a place like this, right? So when I look back on that, the leadership obviously is not involved in the day to day. They don't know their people. They're not there to support their people. They're very quick to anger. They don't take me aside and talk to me about it. But at the same time, I was guilty of the same type of thing with the dishwasher. I wasn't yelling at him or anything, but I probably could have been a little bit more. Of course, I was 16, so I have an excuse. I probably could have been a little more tactful. So when I look back, if I had an employee like that, I put myself in Pat's shoes. That was the GM's name. I won't say his last name just in case, because I don't know. I said some mean stuff about him in my life. Um, I might have taken me aside and be like, "What's your problem?" Or even if he didn't know me, even if he wanted to be. I mean, he yelled at me right there in front of everybody, and everyone was just like, "Taylor's awesome. What do why are you being such a jerk to him? You don't know." And I was like, "Screw this!" I shoved the bus tub into his arms, and I just walked out. So that was kind of my first experience. I mean, obviously my first job. That was my first experience of like having a manager that just didn't give it a crap, about what example he was leading, having his finger on the pulse of the restaurant, anything like that. So that was a good experience to have because I saw, I was really close to all the other managers, and in my mind I was like, all these other managers are so great, so why is the GM such a jerk, or how does he not understand anything? Anyway, so fast forward to my first manager job at Famous Dave's. And now there I was part of a management team, it's full service, $100,000 a week restaurant, and so I was the kitchen manager. We have bar manager, server manager, and our general manager. And so it was like the thing to do to bash the GM because everyone said he was lazy. And we do all the work, we do all the schedules, we do all this. He doesn't do nothing. He makes more than us, and we should get paid. General stupid griping with that from people that have never been GMs, and I am one
Of
of those people.
course.
Now, I never griped like that because I didn't have a problem with the guy, and I was the KM, so I worked very closely with the GM. The bar manager and the server manager usually closing. They're there till 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm usually there at 6 in the morning with my GM, and we're doing all the other stuff. So I didn't really join in on that, but it's really crazy to see how if you're not in control of your management team, because that they were infecting the staff with that. Like all the staff just assumed he was a lazy GM. They didn't know anything about him. But I saw all the stuff we do. And I mean, they weren't there at 4:30 in the morning doing inventory counts, and they weren't there doing, making sure the restaurant was set up. And as a GM, it's your job to make sure the wheels don't come off, right? I mean, like if you have the right people in the right places, you really shouldn't have to bust your butt every single minute. You should be able to take a step back and look at objective improvements to the store or to the systems in place or what kind of development plans we have for the individual employees and stuff like that. So, but these guys were so focused on, we're the foot soldiers, we do all the work, screw this, like real V for Vendetta vibes. Like it was just so dumb. And that was my first experience as a manager, just being on a toxic team, right? And it was so counterproductive because if you think that turning your staff or just your management team against the leader of the store is going to have any positive impact, you are so wrong. Like it can only cause problems. And even if those problems are under the surface, and even if it doesn't cause a lot of drama like in front of people's faces, you are chipping away at the faith that the team has in the person that's steering the ship.
Right.
And as a manager, whatever level you're at as a leader, it is your job to make sure that ship stays on course, so you can't have two people paddling different directions, no matter who thinks they're right or wrong. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not comfortable with the team you're on, then leave, go join another team, but don't sabotage the whole crew by saying that your leader doesn't know what the heck they're doing. I mean, help them and
Right.
talk to them, communicate with them. Hey, why did you do this? Why did you make this decision? I think we could do this better, and have those conversations in private. But the main thing, and my staff, my shift leads, and my assistant managers historically always know this. Like, I will never, ever call you wrong in front of the staff. Like, I will never do that, because
Mm,
that diminishes your role as an extension of me, of my culture and my leadership. So if I'm at a staff meeting, for example, and my manager says something, I mean, let's look like super egregious, you know, the manager says something, I might be like, well, yeah, that's something we can discuss. Or I'm not going to be like, that's stupid, because these
right.
people are running your shifts when you're not in the building. So what are you accomplishing really by throwing them under the bus so the rest of the staff looks at each other like, yeah, they are stupid. Yeah, he's right. And that's what my whole team was doing to our GM. And I just thought it was so, even though, I mean, even though you're kind of like, yeah, we do work harder than he does, you might
Yeah.
have that in the back of your head, you know.
And I don't want to cut you off here, but I do want to ask,
Yeah.
and specifically in full service or even fast casual where there are servers,
Mm-hmm.
this seems to be a common theme with there's too
Right.
much leniency. There's a difference between a manager who micromanages and a manager who isn't present enough. And again, there's a lot that goes into being GM. There's even in a fast casual brand, from just being at Genghis this last year and a half, there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot that you have to pinpoint and be able to work through. And when it comes to numbers, you have to be able to have an answer for everything. So there's a lot that you're focused on, that people don't see. But there's also a balance of being able to make sure that you are seen and heard enough to where you can kind of hear and limit those conversations that are being had about you. And because again, we're all going to have our own thoughts. We're always going to have that, I can do better than you on this. But until you really know what goes into it, there's gonna be an overlap, because you always think I can do better. Um,
Mm.
is How would you go about mitigating, as the GM in a full service restaurant? How would you go about mitigating those issues and making sure that everybody has a clear idea of who you are, what you're focused on? And does that come down to just communication, and holding management meetings and making sure that everybody feels heard, so that way it does? How would you go about mitigating those issues to where we aren't bringing down the person steering the ship?
Well, that's a really good question, and something that I just recently had issues with, that kind of thing. I mean, here's the way I do it, specifically with the management team. I mean, and the entire staff as well, is if I very rarely single people out, right? Because as a management team, we are one unit. If one of us is failing or one of us is doing something wrong, then we all, it's going to affect all of us, right? So we have to be seen as one unit. So if I have one manager that's not doing something, or that's doing something wrong, or that's participating in some sort of counterproductive activities, or gossip, or whatever the case may be, I address that with the whole management team, and the people that it applies to, they know it applies to them. You know what I mean? But it's important that we all understand that even if we're not doing it, we can still learn from it, right? So if I have four people and person A, is just crap in the bed, person B, C, and D, they can still learn from these situations that they may have gotten themselves into, whether it be from a lack of training, lack of motivation, lack of focus, bad decision making, whatever. But the information that I'm giving them, and the you know admonishment or development, however, depending on what their mindset is, if they want to look at it as getting yelled at or getting coached,
Right.
that's on them. But the message is going to be the same, and the message is the same for the entire team, because at any point any one of them could slip into that bad habit or into those mistakes or whatever. So I think it's a mistake, as a GM, to separate people, on most issues. Of course, there are highly sensitive issues that need to be one-on-ones, and those are more disciplinary. But I think
Right.
anything where the team can benefit from hearing about it is smart, to just keep everyone on the same page. And it's the same thing with the staff too. I mean, like, if I have to take the whole staff aside, I'm taking the whole staff aside. And 75% of them might not need to hear what I'm saying, but it's important for me to know that they know and they see that I'm holding everyone accountable, because it's
Right.
really easy to go up to somebody, and you would hear that, I'm sure you've heard from like a lower level staff, and they'll be like, well, so and so never does this, and no one ever does anything, and no one ever says anything. They don't know how many times I've talked to them. They don't know that it's been an issue, you know, but the so keeping everyone kind of like even. I mean, we have a group chat, and we have my group chat for the staff is read only, right? Like making a group chat where everyone can say whatever they want is a mistake. Also, I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah.
It can get real toxic real fast. Now, group chats, if I tell everyone, we all communicate. Now, my manager group chat, that is, of course, I mean, the input. But when it comes to your staff, you need to understand that that chat is there to communicate with them things they need to know, things that are going on in the store, focuses, where we, our wins, our losses, all that stuff. And it's not really a forum for people to be like, well, I'm so much better than everyone else and this person sucks. And that's what it always devolves into. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you're
A
at. I don't
hundred
care how
percent.
big or small your staff is. If you leave it, if you have that open for, at some point, some person is going to infiltrate your staff that turns it into a total, gossip girl situation or whatever. So, we're pretty strict about that, just and using it consistently and just making sure we're all on the same page all the time. But as far as avoiding, you can't avoid it. You can't avoid those people that are going to look at you and be like, I can do a better job than they can do. You're always going to have those people, and if that's their mindset, then cool. What is it that we can do better as a team? Like, what can I do to help you get to where you want to be? I mean, if you want to be a GM, okay, cool. I mean, you want people that want your job. I mean, that's what you want. You should want people that want your job,
Right.
because those are the people that are going to want to learn, and they're going to work harder. Hopefully, they won't take your job, try to take your job in some sort of underhanded fashion. But
Yeah,
if
of
you don't give them
course.
the opportunity to, I mean, we've all been subject to things that, hearing things about ourselves that never happened, and you just kind of have to be like, oh, cool, what happened next? I don't know.
Yeah.
I wasn't there.
Well,
So,
well, so we talked about management and leadership. Another aspect that the podcast that I really wanted to focus on is, you know, either mental struggles or an external source that's adding extra pressure.
mhm.
Is there a time that you feel comfortable sharing where a mental struggle has affected your work? And how did you overcome that struggle or learn to work with it in your benefit?
Oh man, working with it. The one struggle that comes to mind is, I'm divorced, right? So when I got divorced, that was pretty hard. Um, Circumstances like that, relationships, they can fall apart for any number of reasons. And without getting too into the numbers there, it's just like, for me, it was like the thing that I had worked the hardest for and the thing that I cared about the most did not succeed. So what real hope does anything else have? You know what I mean?
Right.
And it was really hard, uh it was good for me, in a lot of ways, because it forced me to go talk to someone about my mental health, and eventually get on a regimen that helped me deal with those emotions. But that was really hard. That really trickled into my work life. So again, going back to square one, what you said about leave your personal crap at home, you can't. I mean, I didn't think anything I did mattered at all. I mean, I could not have been less uh, focused, less committed. I mean, and not focused, like distracted. I mean, I just went to work to go to work.
Right.
I mean, it's just like that's where I
Because
was
it,
supposed to
yeah,
be.
it's
But
just something we have to do.
right, and it just sucks because um, you know it can have that defeating, that kind of self-defeating effect on you. But the best advice that I could give someone in that situation, maybe not specifically, but anytime you think that no matter how hard you try, no matter how what you do, it doesn't matter, um, and you're gonna fail. Well, that let's just play devil's advocate. Okay, maybe you're right. I mean, you're not, but let's say you are. That doesn't that's You still have an entire team of people that you're contributing, to their daily shift, their day, the guests, everything. It's like it's not as easy as just check. When you check out mentally, do you want to put everyone else at a disadvantage? Use them as your reason to kind of keep pushing forward, until you have a reason, another reason that you find within yourself. I mean, uh, it's funny because there's recently I had a situation where I had to make a decision, and everyone said, "Do what's best for you. Do what's best for you. Make the decision that's best for you," which is so funny to me. And I call each and every one of the people that told me that, like, we don't do that, man. Restaurant people don't do that. We don't ever choose what's best for us. Our whole life is in service to the people around us, the guests. We never leave when we're supposed to leave as managers. I mean, there's no
Right.
such thing as an out time as a manager, right? I mean, we sacrifice time with our family, we sacrifice our mental health, our physical health every day for a job that's looked down on by a lot of people. And you have to come to terms with that going into it and understand that we affect more people on a daily basis than most jobs ever, right? Like,
Absolutely, yeah.
we affect everybody. We affect so many hundreds of people every single day. And if you're like me, food is the best thing ever, right? So, I mean, you can really
What
make
could
or
beat
break
it?
someone's day. So good. Um, and it's just like you can't just let your own stuff ruin everyone else's uh, trajectory, I guess, especially as a manager. Now, as a staff member, I'm not going to say that, your responsibilities are as such, but if you're in a leadership position, you can't let life beat you down like that, because so
Right.
many people rely on you. And not just the people that are there today, but let's say, oh, well, F this place, I'm going to quit, right? Okay, well, if you decide for your last 2 weeks that you're just going to do a crap job, you're affecting servers that work in that restaurant 2 years
Mm.
from now. Servers you've never met, servers that are probably in high school right now. You have no clue how much you really affect what's happening in the grand, the butterfly effect that you have in restaurants is crazy. And you see it with bad managers all the time. I mean, you can take 5, 6, 7 years to recover from 6 months of bad management, if
Absolutely.
at all. So it's just so important. So when it comes to mental health, I there's no solution to the right or wrong way to deal with something, but just being cognizant of the fact that your struggles are important. But you know we all have struggles. I'm not the first person in the world whose wife was hotter than him and left him. I mean, that crap happens, man. I mean, I wish it was easy, but like, that happens. And take solace in the fact that you are, instead of saying, oh, well, I failed at this one thing, so now I'm a failure at everything. Take solace in the fact, well, I did fail at this one thing, but I'm crushing it over here. Things will get better. I have people around me that support me, and just kind of, I would have been lost. I mean, without my mom and sisters, I don't know if I ever would have came out of it, but I did. And I'm better for it now. I'm more
Absolutely.
realistic, and uh, I understand. Going through that really made me understand how much it can really ruin the rest. You can let it ruin the rest of your life, just by destroying everything you built. I mean, like I said, I worked for Moe's for 14 years. Uh, why throw all that away just because something didn't go the way I wanted it to, so
Yeah.
it
No,
was it was
100%.
fun. Yeah.
I really appreciate your input on that. I know I mean, not sure the time frame on it, and it sucks to hear about. I'm sorry about that, but I
It's
appreciate
been a
you.
while.
Okay, I appreciate you sharing about it, because to be raw and authentic about something like that is, I mean, I suffer from ADHD, anxiety, and depression. So all three of them together is like a perfect whirlwind, and if I'm not on top of it, I can mentally check out in a split second,
Right.
and it's taken a lot of time to be able to work around that, and to figure out how to make it work in my benefit. And just talking about that seems difficult and seems hard, because I don't want that to pave a negative connotation, or create a negative connotation around me and my work ethic, because I take pride in what I do. Um,
Yeah, for
but you
sure.
did say something that that got my attention, and it is, as a manager, we are expected, and we do a lot a lot more and we're in the building a lot more, especially in the general manager role. Um, you know, there's a lot of people I would say that feel like they are made to feel like they cannot say no in a job. Um,
Yeah.
where's the line with, okay, I'm a manager, this is expected of me, and now I'm just being taken advantage of because I have a strong work ethic?
That might be the best question you could ask ever. I mean, just in the history of managers killing themselves for jobs. So, I mean, when do you say no? So there's two ways to look at it, right? I was always told that if someone above you, if you say no to the person above you too many times, they'll stop asking, right?
Mm,
It doesn't mean you're not allowed to say no. Uh, and you should, but at a certain point they're going and I'm not saying this in that they're right for not asking or they're wrong for not asking. I'm just saying at a certain point, the more often you say no, the less times they're going to say hey. So for
right,
example,
and that's just the truth in that scenario,
right,
unfortunately.
and that's in life anywhere,
Yeah.
if you have a mom and a dad and you ask your mom for money every time and she says no, eventually you'll stop asking and she go to dad because he's a big softie. But uh the so for example, when I was with Moe's, it was always who wants to do this, who wants to go do, who wants to go to this store and help out because the GM's on vacation, or who wants to go to this, and I always said yes. And that opened the doors for me as far as, okay, when new store openings happened and stuff like that, they didn't even ask anyone else because they knew I was going to say yes. So that's a good thing, right? So that's I created a precedent where they knew, hey, this is what we need. We're going to ask Taylor first because, he's going to say yes anyway. So it just saves us 18 different phone calls. So, and that was great. So that's an example of where saying yes, kind of like as a, you know, as a philosophy can serve you well. But as in any situation, people will take advantage of that. And,
Right.
you know, when you pick and choose your yeses and nos wisely when it's coming from above you, and understand that if the person above you is genuinely needs this because it is something that they understand is above, and beyond the expectations or what you already do or you already put in, don't look at it as they think you need to do more. Just think of it as they need my help maybe.
Right.
um, but I don't think there's ever a right or wrong time because every situation is so different, and it really depends on the person who's asking you, right? So if you trust the person who's asking you is asking you because they think you're the best person to do it, then yeah, you're gonna kill yourself uh, over time saying yes, but you have the freedom to remove yourself from situations like that.
Right.
It's not necessarily a bad thing, but you know yourself better than they do. So don't let them, communicate with them and say, look, you've been asking me to do a lot of extra stuff. I love doing it for you. I hope you've been pleased with the quality of the work I've been putting in, but I need you to know that like it's just getting too much. I need time with my family, or I need a mental health day,
Right.
or whatever the case may be. Don't just say no if it's someone that you believe in and you believe that they really need the help, and because you don't want to get in your own way. Um, Not professionally, because I think that the opportunities that were given to me by saying yes helped me develop personally. I
Mm.
mean, there were career opportunities as well, but you know, for me, I took a break and owned my own restaurant for 2 years,
Oh
and I
wow.
hated it. I
Oh.
hated it. I hated it. I hated it because no one was asking me for help. And that's what I wanted. That's what I like. I like people to say, hey, this is what we need. Hey, can you take care of this? Hey, we're having
Mm.
trouble with this. Hey, this store is failing. Can you try and help it? And these are the things you want. These are the things that I'm passionate about. So yeah, being my own boss sounded great. And I learned a lot, and it was a really cool
Mm.
experience. But at the end of the day, I wasn't sharing my wins with anybody. I wasn't helping anyone else succeed, and it just wasn't for me.
Right.
Um, and so I might not be like uh, the best or the most objective person when it comes to asking when you should say no, because I'm not a big no guy,
Mm.
but I do respect people that say no to me because, and as long as you have someone, as long as the person who asked you is asking you for extra work or asking you to do more or put in those 7 days or put in those 80 hours, whatever it may be, as long as that person respects you enough to hear your no and you know work around that with you or help find another solution without you just being the the mule that just does all the work, then I think you can do what's best for you in whatever situation. I know. See, I just said it. I said do what's best for you. Um, but but for me, like if I ask my shift leads or something like that, hey, I want you to take on this role, or I want you to do this one, and they say no, that's cool. That's a conversation we can have.
Right.
And I went, oh, why do you think it's too work? Are you already overwhelmed? Is there something I can help you with to make you feel more comfortable about the job you're doing? Those types of things, and helping them get there, because I wouldn't ask unless I knew that that it would be beneficial for the person I'm asking, a beneficial experience, something, something to help them learn and grow, something just to make them go home feeling good about. Um, so, but if the person asking is just because they don't want to do crap or they just want the easy answer, then yeah, then I would just start throwing no's out like crazy. I've been very blessed with the people that I've worked for over the last 20 years, with a few exceptions. But as a manager, I had a phenomenal owner at Moe's for my first 9 years there. Craveworthy's got great leadership. We know that.
Absolutely.
Great people to lean on. That's why I chose to come here, and so I've got no complaints in that department. But yeah, I mean, if you've got that person that's just like, well, just do this, just do this. Yeah, sometimes you gotta be like, look, man, this ain't gonna happen because you're not getting what you're paying me for. You're paying me for a talent and a skill set that I'm not able to provide because you're riding me too hard, or you're giving me way too much, you're overloading me. And so
Right.
we need to come with a compromise so that we're both, it's a beneficial relationship for both sides. And if they're driving you into the ground, they're not getting what they think they're getting anyway. So
Of
what's the point?
course.
Come up with a better solution.
And I do want to be conscious of your time. We are approaching an hour, but I do want to elaborate a little bit. I think I agree with what you said. For me as well, I would say it's a matter of, am I going to be able, when you make that decision of what's best for me, I would say it comes down to a couple of things, but most importantly and primarily for me, it comes down to, am I already stretched thin, and am I going to
Mm-hmm.
be able to put my best foot forward? Because I'm like
Yeah.
you, I say yes a lot. And
Yeah.
there's been times where saying yes, it was me actively shooting myself in the foot, because I knew that I already had a lot on my plate. I knew that I was already stressed out. And then taking on something else, maybe, I mean, luckily, I've had a slew of decent to awesome managers.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been in a position where, they didn't look at me any other way because I didn't what's the word? I didn't produced my best work in
Yeah.
that yes that I gave out. And I was lucky enough for them to know that that's not who I am. I've done things for them before in which I've exceeded expectations, but
Yeah.
you have to understand that just because you have before doesn't mean that in every situation you're going to be able to. And you really have to take a look at, there's little things that people ask you to do, like, hey, will you take on making sure cleaning tasks get done? Yeah, that's simple. That's daily operational stuff, right? But when it comes
Right.
down to, can you take on another position? Can you be this person to lean on for scheduling? Can you be this person to lean on for LSM? Can you be this person to lean on for whatever the case is? I think that, and I've seen people take positions as well just because they liked their manager and they felt willing to do it, but not because it was a passion for them and not because they actually
Right.
wanted to do it. And so I think it comes down to, number one, if I say yes, am I going to be able to put my best foot forward? And number two, is this something that I actually can see myself doing, or am I doing it to appease somebody else? Um,
Yeah.
and
Hundred percent.
I think that those are the most important things to look at when it comes down to who who you are and what you want to do in your career. Now, like I
Well,
said, oh well,
funny.
go ahead. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
oh, sorry. I was gonna say just quick response to what you just said. It's funny because I used to have a tattoo artist that hated doing tribal, right? He hated doing tribal, and he didn't do portraits. And I always respected the fact that he was very open about that. Now, um, people come into the shop all the time. Obviously, I spent a lot of time in the shop, and I would hear, and he'd have a slow day. He could use the money. I'd be finishing up. He had no other appointments on the books, and people were like, I want this. He could easily be like, yeah, man, let's go back. Let's take care of it and take the money. But he'd say, nah, this guy across town does better on this, or this guy across town does this, because he knew that he wouldn't be giving. It's not exactly the same situation, but I respected that a lot. And about someone that could easily take a quick $300 tattoo job,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and make the rest of his money for the day. But he'd say, no, it's just, that's not my style. I could do it, but I think this guy over here would do it better for you. And I think that, and the tribal stuff, he's just like, anyone could do that, and I hate doing it. So go get someone else to do it,
Yeah,
because I'm not going to
absolutely.
enjoy it, and I'm going to rush through it. And he's just like, so I mean, you could look at that as like, wow, what a jerk. I just want this. Why, but he wanted people to have someone doing the work that could give them 100% of what they were paying for. And I think that's a really, um, that's very telling of character for, for you to reflect and say, can I do this task at 100%? Is, I mean, that's so valuable. That's so much more valuable than you just saying yes to the task, because
Yeah, yeah.
you're giving them honest value and honest feedback about what what they're getting, because you're right, you don't want to just half-ass a bunch of stuff.
No, yeah, absolutely. And again, I I tell shift leads that there's more pride and respect in saying no than saying yes and making people think less of you.
Hmm.
And again, as a manager in my roles, I'm very um, forgiving and accepting. Hey, look, I understand you didn't have the best week. You had this going on. We're not in the business of making excuses, but I understand that there are other things going into why this was the product that we put together. Um,
Hmm.
but I tell people, when it comes to taking roles, when it comes to taking on extra work, I actively will tell people there's more pride. Take your time on your decision, first of all. And secondly, there's more pride in letting me know that you're not going to be able to do something than getting into that role and not letting me down, but maybe letting yourself down, letting down the crew, letting down the overall, it's just, there's so much that goes into it. And I just think it's up to each individual person to really decide what's
Yeah.
going to be best for them. But there is pride in saying no sometimes.
Yeah, I
And
mean, if you give someone some sort of extra task, and like you said, I mean, even if it's not the task that, even if it's not the extra work that suffers, if it negatively affects the normal stuff you're doing, then don't do it. You know what I mean? Because this is job one, and I'm with you 100%. I tell people all the time, if I ask you to do something specific and you don't get to it, just text me, leave a note, something, because I don't want to walk
absolutely.
in the next day and see that it wasn't done and wonder why. Did you forget? Did you not care? Did you not get to it? Was it too big? I mean, I don't know. So like
Right.
those types of communications, it's totally okay to be like, I didn't get to it. This is why. Or I started to do it and I realized I really didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I wanted to wait till you could show me. Like these are things that are totally acceptable, and really beneficial occurrences, as opposed to just doing it just to get it done, check it off a list. So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, you don't want to give your manager a bunch of tasks and then find out that the grill ran long, or to go orders ran long, or there was a bunch of complaints because they were in the back scrubbing something. I mean, that's
Yeah.
silly. I mean, we understand if things can't get done, but just be clear and and consistent with your communication, so that we can move forward productively, for sure.
I did want to ask, do you have like another minute or two, because I
Yeah,
did really want to talk about communication.
sure.
I think that a lot of younger managers hear the word communication and think, okay, I'm going to tell you something, and that's communicating. But
Right.
what we just talked about, we're actively saying, hey, I don't think that I will have my best foot forward on this, or hey, can you teach me how to do this? Things like that to me are the most important part of communicating in your role, and having, you know, people will put on their resumes that they have, they're proficient in communicating, and what does that mean? And to me, it means being able to clearly and concisely get across your point, the meaning of something, or asking questions. I think asking questions is
You
such a
locked
big.
up. You
Oh,
there?
yeah, I am. 1 second. I don't know what's going on with it.
Oh, there you go. You're back.
You can hear me? Okay, cool. Um, well,
You said
yeah,
clearly and concisely. That was the last
yeah,
thing I heard you say.
clearly and concisely get across a message and ask questions as well. Asking questions is a part of communicating that I think a lot of people, they feel insecure to ask questions.
Right. Well, you know, communicating 100% is two people. So just telling someone your opinion on something, that's not communication.
Mm.
That's just telling your opinion on whatever. Now, when that becomes a dialogue and a back and forth, and that's when it becomes communication, especially in a work setting or a relationship setting of any kind, friendship, romantic, familial, anything like that. So when I hear communication, or when I say communication, I don't mean pointing out every little thing that you think is wrong with something. There has to be a dialogue that comes to a resolution, right? So if I am having a staff meeting and I'm talking about communication, and someone says, oh, well, you know every time I come in the morning, the tables are dirty. That's not
Mm.
communication. Communication is more than that. So if it that's just pointing out something that someone didn't do. Not to mention, no mention of the 99 other things they did do, but the one thing they didn't do is the only thing that matters. So,
Right.
you know, not to say the table shouldn't be wiped down, but you know what I mean. I mean, people focus on the negative so much, and I think a lot of times with younger managers, or newer managers, I should say, um, and staff, they think that pointing out all the things that can be better, is for some reason, without responding to the systems that are already in place, is some sort of form of communication. But that's just not true. I mean, um, when people come to me with stuff, I want to be able to ask them, okay, well, the first thing I'll ask them is, well, why do you think that is, right? The quick way, the quick thing they want you to say is, oh yeah, yeah, we'll take care of it. Oh yeah, you're right. That's what they want. They want you to say, oh yeah, you're right, we'll take care of that. But it's not up to us if it gets taken care of. It's up to the people that are doing it when we're not in the building, right? So, I say, why do you think that is? Forcing people to verbalize why things don't get done, whether they realize it or not, in their head, they are basically saying something that they have been guilty of. I
Mm.
mean, they'll say, oh, maybe they were really busy. Well, you're busy sometimes, or maybe they had a lot going on. Well, you have a lot going on sometimes, or maybe their taxi was here and they had to go. Oh, so like, there's, getting them to kind of talk it out with themselves almost. Because, as a manager, eventually you're going to know over time, you're going to hear the same things over and over and over and over and over and
Mm-hmm.
over again. You're going to say the same things over and over and over and over and over again. you know, which goes back to why it's so important that you actually believe it. You have to believe it. I mean, um, if you're a true crime buff like myself,
That I
when
am.
people, the reason that police interrogations, they ask people over and over the same questions, because if they're lying, it will change. If it's not truth, it will change.
Right.
The more often they tell the story. As a manager, the more, if we don't believe what we're saying to our staff, then we're going to mold it to the situation to just get out of the conversation quick, or just to make them happy, or just to placate them, or whatever. You have to really believe what you're saying and what you're doing. And getting them to participate in that conversation can be difficult, but in the grand scheme of things, the right people will learn from it and the wrong people won't. And the
Absolutely.
wrong people will go somewhere else, and the right people will stick with you. I mean, that's kind of my biggest criticism of myself, is I put a lot of faith into other people, but and I do get taken advantage of from time to time. But I firmly believe that when you're surrounded by the right people, I treat them the way that I would want to be treated, so that the way that I communicate with everybody, some people are gonna be like, oh yeah, yeah, they're gonna kind of just say what they think I want to hear to get through it, and I'm not gonna be a dick about it. and they're going to benefit because they don't have a manager that's all over them over little things, because I look for every opportunity to help them learn and grow from each thing instead of just being like, hey, quit doing that crap. Um, so yeah, there are going to be instances where you have people that are just kind of like take advantage of that and be like, oh, well, I'll just pretend that I'm listening and I'll pretend that I care. And Taylor will be like, let's do better next time.
Of course.
But, and that does happen, but the right people are the people that, they're the people that benefit from it. So it's worth it. It's worth it if I get burned every now and again on the wrong people, because I'm giving the right people the environment that they need to thrive. So I'm willing to take that on as a manager and deal with the consequences of those conversations instead of just going around and stomping my feet and banging my hand on the table, because that does work. I mean, some people are managed that way. I mean, some people need to be managed by fear and by not skipping the communication entirely. And that's sad. I'm sad that that's how they like work, how they are corrected. But some people, you can't change the way people choose to be managed.
Right.
I've got 2 kids. I parent them completely differently from time to time because they react so differently to certain situations. And I wish that it was easy and I could just be the same all the time to both of them, but I just can't. And
Right.
so, yeah, it sucks when you put all of this empathy and care and attention to, you know, and to detail as far as their quirks, and you spend so much time trying to understand them, and the whole time in their head you're like, oh, just get this over with. That's my son, by the way. Oh my god. But you have employees like that too, and they'll just say, yeah, you're right, I'll try harder next time, and they won't. But
Right.
that's on them. That's not on you. You don't want to change the way you communicate as a manager based on the fact that it didn't work on this person.
Of
You just
course.
got to believe that you're doing it the right way, and then eventually the right people will start, you know, the culture will build itself, build on top of itself.
Absolutely. Well, Taylor, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me. I mean, especially prior to this, we really didn't have too much communication. I mean, obviously, we know of each other from the company we worked
Mm-hmm.
in. So, I really appreciate you offering me up your time. I want to give you the platform to kind of tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you're getting into, and how we can find you. How if for some reason any recruiters listening or potential candidates down the line, anything like that, how can we find you and where can we hear more from you?
Oh, geez. Obviously I'm on LinkedIn, but I mean, my profile picture is so cheesy that I don't know if I want people to go look there. But
Well, that's okay. You don't have to. I just if you want to, I
no,
want to
I
give
mean,
you the platform to do so.
yeah, and I think that's good. I think that's a really good thing to, networking is so important. I think in restaurants we ignore networking a lot, just because it's not like the traditional, you know, B2B type thing. I mean, you know what I mean. I mean, networking is so important in other fields and is
Right.
talked about so much, financial fields and stuff like that. But man, like, if nothing else, I mean, I always want to talk to people about what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. I think anyone in restaurants or anyone below where I'm at in their career or above or whatever, I mean, that wants to reach out just to talk or have a conversation or just, I mean, I'm always up for it. I love what I do. I love people, which is what every resume we ever see says, and that's not true like 99% of the time. But you have you have to love what you're doing, and I'm so uh, optimistic and proud of what you're trying to do right now with the podcast, because I hate people getting into restaurants for the wrong reasons, getting into management for the wrong reasons, and then being too hard on themselves or whatever. I mean, these conversations need to happen, and this information needs to be out there. And it's like parenting books. There's not one size fits all for everybody, and just because your definition of success is not the
Mm,
same as someone else's, shouldn't change how you feel about what you're doing day to day basis. And any way that you can surround yourselves with leaders and colleagues and peers that believe in you for what you're good at, and get behind you, then you'll go as far as you can. It's like we always say. It's a cliche, but what I always tell everyone when you have your staff bickering each other, it's like, everybody has a different talent level, right? If you and I race, a 100-yard dash, one of us will win, right? But we'll both be tired as hell at the end, right? We'll be sweaty, and we'll be sad that we ran, and why do we do this? It doesn't mean that we both didn't try as hard as we could. And that's the thing that I think that everyone needs to remember is, just because you're not where you think you should be doesn't mean you won't get there. Doesn't mean you didn't try as hard as you can. And I think the conversations about where we are, where we want to be, need to happen across restaurants, instead of just looking at instead of just comparing ourselves to each other and our different job titles and so forth and whatever. But anyway, that's just me rambling a bit, but
No, you're good. You're
I
good.
really like what you're doing, man. I really do. I think it's a really good. If one person benefits from it, then I think you've done a service for sure.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Today has been fantastic. It's a great first episode. It's my first interview I've done for the podcast. So, again, everybody thank Taylor for his efforts and coming on the podcast to talk. If you want to find me anywhere else, Behind the Counter Podcast across Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, for as long as we have TikTok. And also, you can find me at Zane Castillo on LinkedIn. But appreciate everybody for listening, and y'all have a fantastic day. I hope that you all join me again next week for the second episode.